So we call this, and these are some of the books that they've written for you that are watching. Some of them that they've written others, and they other one, and here they are. What a handsome couple! But
That's old. Wow,
you look better.
Younger then.
Yeah, look at that. You were youth. You were just.
I don't even remember when I wore that shirt. It was so long ago.
You do.
Yeah, that shirt disappeared. It was my favorite shirt, and it's.
I think Becky got rid of it. Yeah.
That's probably what happened.
Well, we've enjoyed it. We've taught together in places like Indonesia. We've taught together there. Steve and I have taught in Mongolia. We have been in Uzbekistan together, Russia together. So it's really good to have them on the call with us. I hope other people will join us, but there they are. You see them here, they're in these two windows because they're in different places. It's a trial separation, I think, for them in these days. So we need to pray for them.
That's the way rumors start.
Good to have you with us, and we'll just turn it over to you. And we're going to talk about how to minister to our families by being good listeners to grandkids that talk about stuff that we don't always understand or want to talk about. Especially during these days of political climate, they're in a ballpark than we are. So it's all yours. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to get started. So Sharon, if you want to record this, then others can join in too. We thought it would be a good idea to start by saying why we wrote 3 books on listening, which the third just came out. Steve asked me to hold it up, so I'm being an obedient wife. It's called How to Listen So Your Kids Will Talk. And that one just came out January 5th. And the reason we wrote these books is because Steve and I are very dedicated to family. That's been a huge part of who we are. And what we've noticed is that families are very divided during this season. I mean, Ron, you mentioned the political stuff, and all you need to do is, I mean, right now you can't, but if you were to attend an extended family dinner with your kids, your grandkids, your siblings, you would find that everybody's on a different page politically. I mean, we're a very close family. We have 4 adult kids. We have 14 grandkids. The oldest is 11, so do the math. The 2 most recent are identical twin little boys. And when we get together, a lot of times the topic turns to politics. And so we just have realized along the way that we really need to work on our listening skills. And so that's kind of what drove these books. You know, David Augsburger had an incredible quote that he wrote down. He said, feeling loved is so close to feeling heard that for the average person, they're indistinguishable. In other words, if somebody doesn't feel heard, they don't feel loved. And I know that you, like us, want your kids, your grandkids, your siblings, if you have them, you have family and you want them to feel loved. And here's an important principle that I've discovered as I've been writing these books on listening well. The person who learns to listen well will rarely feel lonely. You know, a lot of times later in life, people feel alone. They feel very lonely. And it could be that they've never really learned how to listen well, because the guarantee is if you learn how to listen well to people, there will always be people who want to talk to you, you know, but the key is to switch your focus from what's going on in your life to what's going on in their life. So Steve, why don't you introduce the verses that we used to shape our family?
Yeah, so very early in our marriage, we got married in 1979, a bunch of years ago now. And very early in our marriage, we were kind of wrestling with what does God want from our marriage? And we landed on the verse Proverbs 24, verses 3 and 4. And this verse has kind of shadowed us our entire married life. By wisdom, a house is built, and through understanding, it is established. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. And in that verse, the psalmist, or the writer of Proverbs, Solomon, he talks about wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Wisdom, of course, is the fact that we need wisdom from God. I mean, just trying to be a parent or a grandparent, man, do we need wisdom. We need wisdom on knowing how to talk to our kids in meaningful ways, so they respond in favorable ways. But it's not just wisdom that we need. We also need understanding. And understanding is that capacity to walk in somebody else's shoes, to really offer them empathy, to draw them out so that they really feel heard. And then there's that last part, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And for Becky and I, we thought about what does it look like to really know each one of our kids as individuals, to really be able to know them deeply and intimately. And we've really made that an adventure of our lives. And even to this day, we're still continually learning new things about our kids, but we make that a huge priority, because when they know that we are pursuing them and really wanting to know them, it makes them feel really valued and honored and noticed and ultimately loved.
You know, so what we want to do during our time together with you is we just kind of want to give you some practical tips, because we believe that you still play a very important role in your family's life. You know, I heard an interesting quote the other day, and I kind of love it. I think I'm going to put it in my office. And it said, if you still have a pulse, you have a purpose. And I love that, you know, so we all have a pulse, obviously, because we're on this call. So our hearts are still beating. And that means God has you here for a reason, a purpose. And part of that reason is learning to listen and make the people in your family feel valued and loved and cherished. And so the first principle I want to give you, I'll tell you how I learned this principle, is to seek to understand rather than to convince or fix. You know, we learn things as parents often the hard way. You know, when Steve and I had kids, we thought we were good parents until we had our third child. And our little Steph was very tiny, but she was mighty. In fact, the pediatrician told me that when she was 3. He said, Becky, she's tiny, but she's mighty. And I remember thinking, you actually have no idea how mighty this child is, because Steph was a negotiator right from the start. So from the time she was 2 or 3, she would start with, don't say no yet, Mom. And then she would launch into her arguments. And one morning, I just fell on my face before the Lord crying. And I was like, Lord, I can't do this anymore. This child is going to need a lifetime of therapy, because I'm pretty sure that I am messing her up. And I'll never forget the Lord's answer to me. He said, Becky, I want you to give her a voice. And I remember thinking, God, I'm pretty sure she has a voice. I mean, this child has an opinion on everything. And he said to me, I don't want you to silence her voice. I want you to shape her voice, because I have plans for Steph. And boy, did he ever. Steph is a strong leader. She comes by it naturally. I mean, both Steve and I are leaders, so it makes sense that we had this very verbal child with a lot of opinions. But that little conversation with the Lord changed the way I parented. You see, often as parents, even in these later years of parenting, when we're listening, our focus becomes, I have to convince them of the right way. You know, think of the political climate right now. I dare say that many of you are on a different side of the aisle than your kids and grandkids are, right? And so politics comes up, and you find yourself thinking, but you haven't thought of this, and you haven't thought of that. And your focus becomes, how can I convince this person that my opinion is correct? Instead, switch your focus to understanding their point of view. Empathy is really crossing the bridge to connect with your adult kids, your grandkids, and the people in your family. You know, whenever I think of empathy, I love to think of Jesus. I mean, if anybody was empathetic, it was Jesus, right? Because he crossed the distance from heaven so that he could walk in our shoes and understand us. And so let me give you an example. My adult kids call me often. And, one of them called me this morning and I said, "Hey, Bethany, how are you? I'm great, but I didn't get any sleep last night because the twins didn't sleep at all." In that moment, what do you think Bethany needs from me? If I launch into, "Oh, honey, let me tell you how to get them to sleep through the night." If I say that, I know the phone's going to hang up in just a couple of seconds, because that's not what Bethany wants. She wants empathy. She wants me to say, "Oh, honey, that must be so hard. You're going on so little sleep. I'm so sorry." And maybe she wants an offer that I'll babysit. That's likely. But the thing is, you can't fix what your kids are feeling. They're looking for empathy. They probably see the political arena very different than you do. Rather than trying to convince them that your way is right, listen to understand them. And if you disagree, it's okay, because they're different people than you are. Then take it to the Lord in prayer. So seek to understand, not to fix. Steve, you want to give us our next one?
Yeah, you did a great job on that one, Beck.
Thanks.
I think a second thing that we have been really learning in our lives, both as parents and grandparents, is the value of asking good questions. Not yes, no questions, but questions that really unlock what our kids are thinking and feeling. And that's one thing that Becky and I really, really have prioritized. And I think now it probably comes more natural to us than it ever did. But when you ask questions of your children, basically you're telling them, "You matter to me. Your opinion matters to me. I value you." And some of the kinds of questions we ask, I'm just thinking about my grandkid right now, one of our grandkids. I could tell that he was struggling a lot with a sense of self-confidence. And so I started, when I got together with him, I took him out on a hike one day and I said, "Hey, I want you to tell me, what do you think are the top 5 things that you're good at?" And he had a hard time coming up with 5 things. And then I would start saying things, "Well, what about this other thing? Do you think you're good at that?" And just watching those wheels turn in his head. And then the following couple of weeks later, I took him out for lunch and I asked him the same questions again. And now he was starting to get clarity on it. And it's amazing to see how that little guy's confidence completely took off because his papa took the time to draw him out.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of, asking questions to draw them out. We have a game we play with our kids a lot. It's called Would You Rather? Mm-hmm. And the grandkids play this game with us all the time. And, I think it's, would you rather be this or rather be that? Would you rather eat a dolphin or, all kinds of stupid things. But it gets them talking. In fact, the other day, Becky was playing this game with our daughter, our granddaughter. How old is Seela now?
She's 8 now, but at the time she was 6.
Okay, so but you asked her the question, would you rather be pretty or smart? And how did she respond?
Right away, she said, "Pretty."
And she's adorable. She absolutely is pretty. But again, it's asking lots of questions. And, in this book that I think it's the last book, the book Becky wrote that just came out just now, but there's a whole lot of questions in there that grandparents can ask their grandkids. And questions like, who's your favorite superhero and why? Or when do you feel happiest at school? Or what do you like most about your best friend? Or when do you feel courageous? If you had $1,000 to give away, where would you give it? There's just a whole bunch of those kinds of questions, but they open up conversation. And when you ask those kind of questions, it gets the kids responding to you. Now, I know that even with our adult kids, we still, we want them to talk to us. And so we're continually asking them questions, not interrogating them, but like, a son-in-law came over the other night for dinner and it was like, "Okay, Zach, tell me, you just started this new internship. What did you find to be the most satisfying part of your day? Or how did that meeting go when you met with the boss? I was praying for you. Or how would you describe the culture of your office?" And then we've had some very frank conversations. We got all of our adult kids together last year, and we had a very vulnerable and transparent conversation between the Marians and the siblings and Marians. And the question was, what do you wish mom and dad had done differently?
Whoa.
And to be able to get them to feel like, they can honestly say, well, Dad, I wish you'd, hadn't said this, or I wish you'd done more of that. It gives me an opportunity to come back and say, I'm really sorry, honey. I wish I'd done that too. And what it does is it validates them, and it also sets them up for how they want to raise the grandkids in a better way. And so we just learned the value of asking questions. And I think that's the Jesus thing, in the sense that Jesus asks questions all the time. In fact, it's amazing to me how often he asks questions. He said to blind Bartimaeus, what do you want me to do for you? And then how many times did he ask his disciples? I mean, all kinds of questions he asked. Jesus was an amazing question asker. But by asking questions, he validates the worth of his listeners. And when we ask questions of our adult children and of our grandchildren, what are we doing? We're saying, you matter, your opinion matters, your perspective matters. I value you.
Yeah. In fact, at Sunday dinner, we all got a big laugh about this, because our daughter-in-law, Shani, has started a new job in the last few months, and she's the head of this hospital, the whole wound care program. So we kind of affectionately call her the boss lady. And so she and JJ were sitting on the couch, and Steve took his ice cream and sat down right between them. And I'm like, hey, babe, we're trying to encourage marriages here. But he put his arm around Shani, and he was asking her, so how'd it go this week? And what about this? And what about that? We all had a good laugh about it. But asking questions is a great way to validate your kids. The third principle is to offer your full presence. We are such a distracted society, and this whole new age of smartphones has introduced something new, and scientists are calling it technoference. And they've done research on how technoference is interrupting family life. If you were to go to a park and watch parents, their kids are all playing on the playground equipment. And what are parents doing? They're scrolling Facebook, Instagram, news reports, and we all do it, right? Because even though we didn't have smartphones when our kids were being raised, we do now. And so if you're really going to be present to your kids and grandkids, put your phone away for a while. It doesn't stop there. With those of us that are grandparents, a lot of times we have our own agenda for where we want the conversation to go, right? So, maybe we're getting together with a grandchild who is older, and we really want to have a powerful conversation with that grandchild. And a lot of times that agenda keeps us from really being present to what our grandchild wants to talk about. It's interesting, because I pick up our little grandson Ty from school a lot of days, because my daughter, they had identical twins. They have a special needs child. They have another child. So this is a small way I can help. So I often pick up Ty from school, and I have to, before he comes out that door, I literally pray, Lord, help me to lay aside everything that's on my mind so I can focus on Ty. And it's really funny. Ty never tells me anything about schoolwork. He tells me first and foremost who he played football with on the playground, who ate what at lunch, what happened in specials. I really never hear anything about homework, which is really fine, because I know that to Ty, the sports are what's most important. But I have to lay aside my agenda to be fully present to him. And, even at this older age, that can be hard to do for some of us. But if you really love somebody, you're going to lay aside your agenda. You're going to lay aside your cell phone. You're going to maybe turn off the news and just really give your undivided attention to that person. Because by doing that, you're saying, hey, I value you. You're precious to me, and I want to hear what's on your heart. So Give the gift of your undistracted presence.
Yeah, it's a really big one because the truth of the matter is I'm not good at that. I have my smartphone on all the time, and it's, I'm learning that I have to kind of park things and just let it aside. It's not that urgent. What matters most is the relationship, So here's the third thing that I wanted to share with you, or fourth thing. I don't know which one we're at now, Beck, but where we
We're
are.
on 4.
Number 4. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about nonverbals because, when it comes to communication, up to 75% of what we communicate is not from our words, but actually from the nonverbals. I'm talking about, the rolling of the eyes, the crossing of the arms, the frowns, the pouting looks, the pointing fingers. All those things are nonverbals, but they speak volumes. Proverbs 12 verse 6 says, fools show their annoyance at once. So when you're talking to a fool and you say something he doesn't agree with, right away, he doesn't have to say a word. All you got to do is look at his face or his nonverbals. They tell you everything. And I think as the older I get, I found that it's easier to fall into just kind of patterns where I'm not even conscious of the nonverbals. And it's something I've had to kind of keep an eye on in my life. And I'm learning too the value of, really smiling. Simple as that. Leaning in, showing excitement. When the grandkids come over, whatever I'm doing, I try to stop doing it and spend a few moments showing excitement that I'm glad to see them, because I want my kids, my grandkids, I want them showing up. And so when I express excitement that they're over at the house, even when it's an interference in my day, that speaks volumes. So I think that the nonverbals really, really matter. It was Tony Hughes who said, if you're excited, tell your face about it, because it does matter. And the way we look, the way we appear, the way our nonverbals communicate is very significant. I think that's even maybe more significant now than ever before, because, I look at the division in the church right now, and frankly, it's a heartbreak to me, because the church is so divided over politics and so divided over the issues. And it's honestly, I feel like the devil's got a foothold in the church right now, here in America, because we're just arguing with each other. And it's almost like we've stopped thinking that the most important thing is for us to be like Jesus. It's like the most important thing sometimes seems to be like we need to get our own way. But these are hot issues, and when we talk about them, I feel like we're not even able to be safe expressing our political views for fear of being rejected. And a lot of that rejection doesn't even have to be verbal. It just by a look, by a frown. And that's just, we got to start paying attention to that again, all of us do, because it's just easy for us to fall in these patterns where other people simply don't feel safe, and our kids don't feel safe talking to us because they just figure, oh, mom and dad, they think such and such about me. They don't respect my, and nonverbals communicate that stuff really, really clearly. So again, listen well, but watch your nonverbals.
Yeah, it's interesting, Steve, that we're talking about nonverbals, because I think it was like last week or 2 weeks ago, I was scanning the news and I saw people on both sides of the aisle talking passionately, and they had their fist in the air. And I thought, wow, this is kind of a summary of where we are right now. And that's why I think, we need to be lowering our fists and inviting our kids to share their opinions and really allowing them to express their views, even when they're different from ours, because God said that we're supposed to be known by our love for one another, not by our political views. And so, I really thought about that a lot last week. And I thought, I should really ask my kids how they view me. Do they view me with my fist in the air talking about politics, or do they view me as somebody that really loves them? And so that's a good thought. The fifth principle we want to give you, and this is probably my favorite out of all of them: listen to figure out how to pray for your kids and your grandkids. I believe that the greatest gift you can give your kids and your grandkids is the gift of praying for them. It's a passion of mine. When I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't get back to sleep, I know God's inviting me to pray. And so I start with the oldest grandchild and I go down to the youngest grandchild. And I know them well enough to know where they need prayer. You know, if I moved my camera, I'm in my office at home, but you would see that I have 14 prayer journals. I have a prayer journal for each grandchild. Now, I don't write in each journal every day, but when something comes up, I write out my prayers for that grandchild. And one of the things that I love to do is when I don't know what to pray for that grandchild, I pray scripture. And I think if you can unleash that weapon in your prayers for your kids, for your grandkids, the results are incredible. Both God uses those prayers to change your heart and give you a more loving heart for that child or grandchild, but he also uses those prayers to change your child's heart. I remember a season in our youngest daughter's life. You know, Carrie was absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. And if you've done Strength Finders, you know about the gift of woo. And so, you know, she had these big blue eyes and she would roll them at every guy in high school. And every guy in that high school wanted to date her. I mean, that's where Steve got his gray hair. And, you know, she would come home on Valentine's Day and she would have like boxes of candy, flowers, teddy bears. And Steve and I used to look at each other saying, how did this happen? You know, and there was a season where she was really dating a jerk. I mean, there's just no great way to say this. He was a jerk and he wasn't walking with the Lord. He was very mean to her. And for whatever the reason, she didn't feel she could get out of the relationship. And we did a number of things. Steve invested and took her to Israel, and that helped. And I got down on my knees and I remember praying through the book of Ephesians for her every day for a month. I would put her name in every single verse and pray through the whole book for her. And at the end of that month, I got a call, not from her, but from my older daughter who said, Mom, don't say anything to Carrie yet. But she called me last night and she's going to break up. And I mean, the whole family was praying about this because this kid really wasn't good for Carrie. But I know that the power of praying scripture for your kids and grandkids is unparalleled. But in order to pray that effectively, you have to be listening. You have to be listening to what's on their hearts. You know I have one grandchild that right now is really struggling with lying. And so, you know, I'm praying scriptures about how important truth is to God. And I'm praying that over this little guy because his first temptation when he gets in trouble is to just lie about it, to get out of it, you know? And I have another grandchild who is struggling in the confidence area. And so I'm praying, you know, verses like Psalm 27, 3-4 for him, you know, but I remain confident that I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And so you have to be listening to your kids and your grandkids so that you pick up even on what's not being said and you know what to pray for. You know, one of the greatest joys in my life is actually Steve's dad. Steve's mom went home to be with the Lord last February. We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary. And Steve's dad has always been extremely precious to me. You know, he'd always put his arm around me and say things like, you know, you're really my daughter, don't you? And, you know, I love you so much, Becky. And so since Mom died, I call Dad every day. He's 92 and, you know, we chat and I want to hear his heart and I want to share mine. And he always listens for what he can pray for, you know? So if I say, you know, I have a radio interview later today he'll be like, I'm praying for that, Becky, and for the grandkids, I'll say, okay, little Zacky's really having trouble. Our little Zacky has some special needs. He has autism, and Steve's dad will say, oh, I'm praying for Zacky, and he has set such a beautiful example for me of what it's going to look like as I grow older. I might not be writing books when I'm 90, probably not, but I hope I'll still be praying for my grandkids, my great grandkids, for my kids, because here's the thing, no matter how old your kids get, they're going to need prayer. They never stop needing your prayers. And I bet that you are the person that prays for them the most. So take up that mantle, listen for what you can pray for, and then go for it and cover your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids in prayer, and use scripture.
My dad has he sets aside Fridays to pray for the grandkids, and not just for our grandkids. We have 14, but between the whole tribe, I'm one of 4 siblings, so there's a whole bunch of grandkids and great grandkids, and he sets aside Friday to pray through every single great grandchild. And that I know he learned that from his own mother. My grandparents went to Africa in 1925 to a tribe of cannibals, and they were told, "Don't go there; they'll eat you." And yet they felt clearly called of God to go, and the Lord did incredible things. And today, the Tangale tribe in Nigeria is a predominantly Christian tribe that has produced some of the greatest leaders that the country of Nigeria has ever known. And Grandma and Grandpa were a part of that story. But I can remember when Grandma was she was in her 90s, and at the time she was in a nursing home, and I knew that I didn't have much more time to be with her. So I was in New York. I caught a flight down to Florida, and I went into her room, and she was lying there on the bed, and she had these very, very thick eyeglasses, very, very thick. And when you looked at her, it made her eyeballs really, really huge. And but she couldn't see, even with those glasses, she couldn't see very well. And I leaned over her bed, and she reached up and she put her hands on my face, and she drew me down until I was literally 3 inches away from those big eyeballs. And her last words to me, from my grandmother to me, she said, "Steve, I have prayed for you every single day of your life." And then she said something really odd, like, "Don't disappoint me now." I'll never forget that for as long as I live. But it was that commitment to prayer that has been just a bolster for me in my life. And I hope to be able to offer my grandkids a similar kind of thing, of praying for them and knowing them well enough to pray specifically for them. So I know that for some of you right now, that's the major gift that you can bring your kids. But I would encourage you to tell them that you're praying for them. Let them know, and let them know specifically what you're praying for. Don't point out their faults and say, "Well, I'm praying you'll be more kind." That's not it. But actually praying for them, and then letting them know, "Hey, I've been praying about it. You had that appointment the other day. I want to know how it went. I was praying for you." That means an awful lot. There are some things that we've talked about listening in this little chat, but I'll tell you, there's about 5 things that I have learned to say to my kids all the time. And here's what I tell them. I tell them, "I love you," all the time. I don't ever want them to question that. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life as a parent, as a grandparent, but there's one thing I never want my kids to ever have to doubt. I don't want them to have to doubt whether Papa loved them. So I love you. I'm proud of you. I always tell my kids I'm proud of them. I'm praying for you, and I mean it. I actually do. I see Jesus in you, and I tell them where I see Jesus in them. And every time they have a birthday, every member of our family, whether it's an adult or a child, we go around the room and we say, "Here's what we see in your life, the growth we see, the things that touch us, things that bless us, the ways in which we see Jesus in your life." And then I always tell them, "I'm sorry. I've made a lot of mistakes. Becca and I have. We just count at the grace of God that we have the kids we have. They're better than us. I mean, honestly, it's been an incredible blessing to have this tribe. But we wanted to know that we love them, and we wanted to know that we're willing to say, "Hey, I wish we'd done better. I'm sorry that I wasn't more present. I'm sorry I said that." We want to take ownership of those kind of things. And I close kind of with this thought, as long as you've got a pulse, you got a purpose, as Becky said. And I know there's some of you out there that are probably wishing, gee, I wish I'd done things a little differently. I wish I'd handled this differently or that, or I feel estranged. I feel isolated. As long as you got breath in you, there's still an opportunity. And even if you're estranged, there's still an opportunity. Doesn't mean everything's going to work out fine, but to the best of your ability, what can you do to try to bring that reconciliation and to reach out? And so my encouragement to you is to send that card. My dad sends handwritten notes all the time. I probably every other month, Becky or I'll get a handwritten note from Dad about something. Send that card, write that email, make that phone call, whatever you need to do to reach out to that family member, because in the end, your ultimate legacy is going to be the tribe you leave behind and those kids that you leave behind. This issue of listening well has impacted Becky and I a great deal, because it started off maybe with the idea of our family and, how could we listen to our kids so that they would grow up to be strong, Jesus-loving characters that have purpose and intentionality behind their lives. But it's gone way past that. And I think that the calling for us is, as leaders, how do we help other people feel valued and honored and noticed? And that's ultimately by listening. And we wrote that book that Ron made a picture of earlier, Listen Well, Lead Better. And I kind of close with where that book had its genesis. First of all, the publisher came to Becky and said, would you write a book on leadership, listening as a leader? And Becky said, no, I won't, because, anyway, they had to persuade her. And she said she'd only do it if her husband participated. And I wasn't sure I really wanted to participate. However, there was a triggering moment for me. I was in a taxi cab in Sydney, Australia. And I was on a ride all the way through beautiful downtown Sydney and then off onto the airport. And the taxi driver was a Somali. He was a Muslim from Somalia. And he had migrated to Australia. And, as we were riding along in the taxi, I felt like, I should sit in the front instead of the back seat. So I sat up front with him. And we talked about his journey from Somalia to Australia and what it was like to live as a Somali immigrant in Australia. And we ultimately got around to talking about his family. And then from there, it went into his religion as a Muslim and his views on God. And we had an incredibly delightful conversation. And then as we got close to the Sydney airport, I can still remember the exact spot as we were driving into the airport. I looked at him as he was driving and I said, Omar, just tell me. I said, I meet a lot of Muslims around the world. Can you give me some advice? Can you just give me one piece of advice that you think that would really help me as I talk to Muslim people? And I will never forget what he told me. He said, you Christians, you like to tell everybody what they ought to think, but you don't take the time to listen and understand. And that's when it just hit me that, wow, what if the followers of Jesus were known as the people who listen and understand? What if in this world that's so divided right now, everybody on both sides yelling past each other, talking past each other, shouting past each other, what if the Christians were the ones who stood up and were the ones who were known for listening and understanding? I think it would be a truly remarkable thing. And I think we have the space. We have this space that the world is not occupied because nobody's listening anymore. They're all talking. Nobody's listening. But this is our space and this is our time. And I think that as we choose to listen to our children, we send them a message that says, I value you, I honor you, you matter to me. And when we choose to listen to other people from a different political party, from a different persuasion, what are we doing? We're saying, you matter. I notice you. You're important. I value you. And you know what? When we start to do that, amazing things happen. For starters, our children feel safe with us and they feel valued by us. Our neighbors would feel cared for and feel like, wow, whatever those people have, I want. Our churches would be seen as safe places where people can talk openly about the things they struggle with. And most of all, I think Jesus would really be honored because Jesus was an amazing listener. All right, friends, there we go.
Wow. That I'm glad you recorded this, Sharon, because we need to share it with a lot of people.